Our second reading this morning is from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 35, verses 1 through 10. The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad, the desert shall rejoice and blossom. Like the crocus, it shall blossom abundantly and rejoice with joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given to it, the majesty of Carmel and Sharon. They shall see the glory of the Lord, the majesty of our God. Strengthen the weak hands and make firm the feeble knees. Say to those who are of fearful heart, be strong, do not fear, here is your God. He will come with vengeance, with terrible recompense. He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. The lame shall leap like a deer, and the tongue of the speechless sing for joy. For waters shall break forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert. The burning sand shall become a pool, and the thirsty ground springs of water. The haunt of jackals shall become a swamp. The grass shall become reeds and rushes. A highway shall be there, and it shall be called the Holy Way. The unclean shall not travel on it, but it shall be for God's people. No traveler, not even fools, shall go astray. No lion will be there, nor shall any ravenous beast come upon it. They shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. And the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with singing. Everlasting joy shall be upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. I'll remind all of us that next Sunday we will be celebrating Christmas Eve. We will be having the 8:30 service and the 10:45 service in the morning. We will come back in the evening at 7 o'clock for the family worship service in the fellowship hall, and then the 11 o'clock candle lighting here in the sanctuary. Now, I expect to see all of you here for all of those because I have to be here for all of those. I told the small congregation here at 8:30 this morning that they shouldn't tune in on TV. Sometimes they like to watch and see what else is going on other than me talking. And I said, now, they didn't have a sermon the first Sunday of Advent. They didn't have a sermon the second Sunday of Advent. So there are 3 of them this morning. I've shared this story before, but I think it's worth sharing again. 99 years ago, a young Army officer slowly crossed the United States in a military car convoy on the Lincoln Highway, America's first transcontinental highway. This 2-lane road ran through all the little towns and cities all the way from Trenton, New Jersey, to Canton, to Eureka, to Oakland, California. In 1956, that young serviceman, having become the President of the United States, signed the Federal Highway Act establishing the Dwight D. Eisenhower National System of Interstate and Defense Highways. Did you know that was all the title of when we talk about 64 and those? It's really the Dwight D. Eisenhower National System of Interstate and Defense Highways, number 64. So I'd like you to get that from now on, please. I know if you don't tell me all that, I'll get lost. I imagine that if President Eisenhower had made a similar transcontinental trip after the interstate system traversed this continent, he might have waxed poetic like the writer of Isaiah. Isaiah lived in Judah during the 8th century BCE. During his life, he saw the northern kingdom, Israel, fall to the armies of Assyria. One might imagine that he stood roadside and watched as his former countrymen and countrywomen fled in fear, or were marched off into slavery. Even as Eisenhower came to believe that America's defense depended upon an interstate system connecting city to city and coast to coast, so Isaiah came to envision a peaceful time when a highway would lead all the nations to the city of Jerusalem. There are some in this congregation who have set a goal of getting to all 50 states. Some are close. I'm not sure if anyone has made it yet. If you have, let me know about that, please. But the one thing that those of us who have traveled all around this country can see is the amazing natural diversity of this land. But we don't see so much what Isaiah saw as of what Isaiah dreamt it could be when God brings new life out of old. Wilderness, dry land, and desert would blossom with wildflowers breaking into joyous song. Where once there had been dry bone desert, now there would be an abundance of waters, lakes and rivers, springs and streams. Where once the burning sand had been scorched by the noonday heat, pools of water would spring up, offering respite and recreation. Where once craggy cliffs and rugged outcroppings had been the haunt of scavengers and jackals, streams would flow down, turning thin grasses into waves of broad-leafed reeds. And right there, in the middle of this new creation, this wondrously fertile land, this amazingly abundant land, this land that was referred to as flowing with milk and honey, if you will, sits Mount Zion, the holy city, the new Jerusalem. And in this new creation, the one-lane road leading out of the city, the one-way road carrying his kinfolks into captivity, would become a 4-lane interstate highway flooded with pilgrims coming to the mountain of the Lord, flowing into Zion. A highway of rejoicing, a pathway of peace leading into the city of peace. But Isaiah's dream of peace and prosperity never really became reality. In a few short years, the southern kingdom of Judah would also fall victim, this time to the Babylonians. Elsewhere, Isaiah describes a nation gone wrong. The divide between the wealthy and the poor was growing, mostly on the back of working men and working women. The nation's tax system established by King Solomon was skewed so as to be a heavy burden for those in the workforce and much lighter on the wealthy. And a mistaken worldview where being chosen by God as God's chosen people, this played out in an arrogant way, in an entitled way, in a way that led to the neglect of the poor, the homeless, the elderly, the alien. This chosenness ideology blinded them to the idea that their nation could fall victim or their prosperity could be lost. What Isaiah sees is a nation trapped in free fall without the slightest inkling of its certain demise. While Isaiah sees the transformation which God fosters as physical and political, he also sees a profound spiritual transformation. Whether one's eyes or one's heart is blinded, both the heart and the eyes will be opened. Whether one's ears or one's soul hears only silence, both will awaken to the sound of God's love. Whether one is crippled by injury or ignorance, one will be freed to fly like a deer. whether one is without the ability to speak or without the power to speak, one will break forth in glorious song. Everyone in need of redemption, lost in the powers of this world which hold us back, the systems which enslave us, the forces which imprison us, all of them will be ransomed. Isaiah sees the present norms of life as abnormal, and God's great day of joy and justice as the new normal. Here in Isaiah, the language of redemption and ransom likely refers to the realm of family law, where a family member is brought back from slavery, and property lost in economic disaster is restored to the rightful owner. This is the language of reconciliation, where past wrongs are wiped away in the high tides of justice and mercy. This is the language of forgiveness, where old wounds are healed, old wrongs are righted, and old enemies become best of friends. This is the language of jubilee, when debt is forgiven and dignity is regained. I can't help but hear Isaiah's words as if they were spoken now, today, rather than 3,000 years ago. The parallels between that great nation, Judah, and this great nation, America, are troubling. Our sense of entitlement among the world's nations, our ceaseless striving for more and more, the wealthy's use of power and prestige to shape the national identity in their own way, our seeming disregard for the poor, the aged, those struggling with illness, our children and our youth, the economic stratification and racial stratification, where this was once a nation of light and hope, and people from all parts of the world streamed towards its freedom. Now we have become more resistant to their ongoing arrival. And our willingness to devour the earth for our own needs, while demanding more from others than we are willing to do ourselves. Advent comes calling us into a new creation, into a new relationship with God, with one another, indeed with all of creation. Advent comes beckoning us to enter once more that Edenic garden which God has already created and where we already live. And because we have become calloused to all God's prophets and God's dream, God sends a baby, a little child, to lead the way. When a baby enters a room, doesn't everyone's attention focus on the baby? And so this Advent season, leading us up to next week, prepares us to look at that child and to imagine where that child would lead us today. And I believe that would be the way of Isaiah. A recognition of the beauty, diversity of our earth, of our people, our dependence upon one another, our need to respect and listen and honor one another. Our need to let a child lead the way. The story of Advent, that Emmanuel, God is with us, shows us the way. The story of Advent, that Emmanuel, God is with us and has come to show us the way. The question, of course, is will we follow?